You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the #1 national best-selling author of the book On Fire. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, and he's the host of the Live Inspired podcast. John interviews extraordinary individuals on their life story so that you can wake up from accidental living and more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Our guest today's name is Jason Wahler. Jason Wahler is an addiction and a mental health advocate whose personal battle with addiction shaped his mission to educate, inspire, and support others in recovery. This guy's got an amazing story. Once living a life of a reality television star, you're going to learn about it during this episode, had endless opportunities in the red carpet rolled out before him. He also, during that time, though, struggled mightily with substance abuse and was on the very brink of losing everything. After years of a very public struggle, Jason turned his life around and is now committed to helping others break from addictions and achieve lasting recovery in their lives. Today, on our episode together, Jason opens up and shares about his early struggles with OCD, the pressures he discovered in reality television, and they were mighty, the turning point in his life that led to his lasting transformation and what it means for you. He also shares the power of making amends, the role of faith in his life, and the dedication to helping others rewrite their own stories. My friends, this episode is going to serve as a powerful reminder that no matter the challenges that we face, regardless of the difficulties we have been part of, regardless of the mistakes we have made, indeed, redemption is possible and the best is yet to come. You're going to love this episode with my new buddy and now yours. His name is Jason Wahler. Jason, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me, brother. Grateful to be here.
I have been looking forward to this since we first booked the opportunity to sit down with you, and I'm grateful. For those who stepped in a minute late and they missed my rambling introduction of you, if you were forced in Franklin, Tennessee to introduce yourself to a new friend and they said, Jason, tell me about you, what would you say?
Man, that's a great question. Off the bat, I would say I'm a believer. I love the Lord. I am married. I have 2 kids with a third on the way. I'm somebody that is a big advocate for mental health and addiction. I've had my own trials and tribulations, and God has helped correct me and put me onto a path to be a beacon of hope for those that are lost. I am somebody that loves being outdoors, natural highs. I love the nature. I love fishing. I love hunting. I can't surf much in Tennessee, but I do love surfing. Love wakeboarding, love skateboarding, mountain biking, anything that has to do with outdoors, and a family-oriented man that holds God and his family and his faith at the ultimate highest, and somebody that's constantly willing to grow, learn, and to be a better person.
When people hear that introduction that you just gave yourself as you're celebrating your life today, they may have missed the profoundly difficult journey that got you here. And
Yeah.
that's what I'm excited to celebrate, not because it's fun kicking a dog when they're down, but for the rest of us when we are down, to know that there's stories like yours and countless others that are so redemptive, so filled with despair at one point and now replete with hope in the next. So I'm gonna have you get back into the moving truck. We're gonna leave Nashville, Tennessee, and we're gonna go back out to California. I think you're the youngest out of 4. Is that true?
Yes, I am. I'm the youngest of four.
You mentioned wakeboarding and on a bike and all this crazy stuff that you like doing still today. I would imagine you spent a lot of time as a kid growing up outside.
I did, man. I had such an incredible childhood. I was born and raised in Laguna Beach, California, as the youngest of four. I got two older brothers and an older sister, a very connective family. Parents who are incredible. They actually just celebrated 52 years of marriage, raised us with amazing morals and values. But yeah, growing up, man, it was all about we've still to this day have a house out in in Lake Arrowhead where we do a lot of wakeboarding, fishing, skiing, a house in the desert we've had forever. We go out there and golf and just spend time together as a family. Obviously, growing up by the water, surf, skimboarded, boogie boarded. It was just a part of our daily culture and what we did. And just being outdoors was something that I thrived in. That was my area and what I loved doing. And I was grateful that my whole family loved participating in that because family trips was a huge part of that wherever we would go.
I've heard you share with other folks that you, in addition to loving wakeboarding and family hunting and fishing, you quietly struggled, that you had OCD from a relatively young age. How did that show up in your life as a kid?
It was crazy looking back at my OCD. So I struggled with OCD probably from the ages of, it started probably at 11, 12, 13. And to paint the picture for people with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, I used to wash my hands until they would bleed to the point where I'd have to put neoprene gloves on with Neosporin to basically treat what I was dealing with. And it was bizarre going through that because that mental health issue came out of nowhere. And I don't know if it was because of going through the stages of early stages of puberty. There was nothing that was really catastrophic or crazy that had happened in my life to trigger an onset of something. But this started to develop and it really started to take control of my life at a very young age to the point where it was debilitating.
Did anyone know it, man? You got all these siblings around. Your parents have been together 52 years and they're raising you all as best they can. And you have coaches in your life and teachers and friends. Were folks aware of what you were going through?
My parents knew everything that was going on. They were there the whole time, right alongside with me. But they obviously could see my hands. They knew something was going on. And my parents, to the best of their ability, did what they could. And we ended up seeing psychiatrists, we ended up seeing doctors, we ended up seeing therapists, and did everything that we possibly could to address and to treat the underlying issue. But unfortunately, at that time, again, it was not really able to communicate what it was that I was going through. You have to keep in mind this was back in the what mid 90s this was going on, and again it was just there was obviously something that was there. But when I'd seen psychiatrists, they basically gave me medication which helped mitigate the symptoms, but we never dealt with the true underlying issues. That is just the beginning starts of where this
Right.
started to go, because the medicine obviously helped, but we never were able to really find out what the underlying issue was. And that's where you look at in my story at a young age too, and the reason why this was so challenging is at 12, 13 years old, I was forced to live a double life because on one side, I was perceived as a popular kid. I was outgoing, I was athletic, very relatable. And then behind closed doors, I'm dealing with this OCD challenge where I'm telling my mom and dad, Mom, I need the gloves again. My hands are cracking, they're bleeding. And so it was this double life that I was starting to live. And unfortunately, it became very challenging. And if you fast forward a little bit, and that's when I come into alcohol, I find alcohol and I'm like, dude, who needs medication? Alcohol is going to be the result for everything. And that's basically when it was off to the races. And that's when things started to get really challenging and get more complex and really started to get crazy. That's when
Mm.
things started to unpack.
You found alcohol. It's the way you framed it. At what age did you find it?
I think I really started leaning into it around probably like 14, 15 years old. It's funny, the first time I ever encountered alcohol, which I'm going to save us the grace of the story, if I've already shared it on another show, and it was quite embarrassing. But I'll tell you this much: it was not like this profound, incredible experience with alcohol. It was actually quite the opposite, which would make anybody probably not want to turn back to alcohol. And from my side, it was I didn't have this like glorious interaction the first time that I'd had it, but obviously after a couple interactions and started to partake, because the first time I'm alluding to is I didn't even really drink. I was actually terrified of it, to lose control of your body and stuff and what the people around me were doing. It was definitely didn't want to be doing what they were doing. Let's just put it that way. But after few times down the road, it's something that I obviously leaned into, and I started to lean into pretty heavily 15, 16, 17. And that's right around that age is when I was started struggling more so is when I entered into my first program. I actually went to a wilderness program called Walkabout, and then I went to a boarding school after that called Discovery Academy. And that was something that was mutually agreed upon. Obviously, I was struggling. I was wanting to make change, but just didn't know. Again, as you're 17 years old, you're the most impressionable.
Right.
There's a lot that's going on in your life. Part of it was to maybe get some of the heat off of me a little bit, but part of me was not resistant to getting help. Again, it goes back to that family dynamic that I had that was very connective and open and communicative. We did things as a group and made that decision, but that was just the beginning and the first of many.
It's the first of many. So you got this kid who's got a hole in his heart already, trying to fill it with all kinds of things. And then in the midst of what you're already using as your mask, you get dropped into a television show that becomes the number one television show in the world, courtesy
Yeah.
MTV. Talk about the beginning of Laguna Beach and just for the folks, because many of our listeners, either because they're too young or maybe a little bit more seasoned, won't be familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I was, and three of my colleagues know every single episode that you were in because everyone from a little bit younger than I for about 10 years, they all know the show, man. It was huge.
No, it was a big show. We did not know the phenomenon that it was going to be. But again, like I said, you take somebody that is struggling, has got his own underlying issues going on. I always told people I had an overinflated ego with an underestimated sense of self-worth. And then you throw them on a
Do me a
television.
favor. We say that again because it was so good. I've heard you say that once before and I wrote it down.
Yeah.
Say that again because I want to make sure people hear it and understand it.
Yeah. So I had an overinflated ego with an underestimated sense of self-worth. And what I mean by that is the way that I was projecting my life is the way I wanted you to see it, even though that's not how I felt about myself. Ultimately, you throw this individual on myself on a show and it has this tremendous success. And that's just adding fuel to the fire because now you have to remember this happened when I was in high school at 18 years old. Again, going through my own trials and tribulations, continuing to struggle. And at 18, 19, most kids are looking for fake IDs and just trying to go and have a good time. We're basically being paid to party and travel the world. And life became very distorted. I was basically go to high school. I was supposed to go to college. I want to continue to play baseball. And overnight with this show, that whole trajectory changed dramatically. And then it ended up moving up to LA. The show did very well, which again, I thought it was just going to be a one-off type of thing and have your senior year documented and boom,
Yeah.
you're off to the next thing. And that wasn't the case. The one of the girls I was dating at the time ended up having a spinoff, which was The Hills, and that dominoed into a whole nother series and a whole nother show that again, you got to see a lot of my story through that because I went through a very public battle with addiction. It was no secret of what it is that I was going through. And actually looking back, I actually watched one of the shows about a year ago and one, I don't know how the shows did as well as they did. They weren't as good as people thought, but I was sick, man. I was really sick. And again, I think it just goes to show is obviously people knew something was going on, but it's not nearly as apparent as it is today with what I was struggling with. I think some of that was more of a social norm to a degree. I'm not saying all of it by any means, but just looking back, it's like it's black and white how much that I was struggling and obviously completely under the influence and just going through a lot of my own developmental issues. And that was a really hard time in life. And again, is at that age where the family dynamic, have the close relationship and stuff with them. But obviously that became distorted because lost sight of who I was and it became my way or the highway. During that time, I started becoming independent. Most kids at 18, parents still have pretty good financial restraint to a degree over them. But we started to have some success and started to have our own area to be able to thrive. And yeah, that's where those things left off.
You at one point went to 30 states over 6 months, paid essentially to party. They
Yep.
paid you to go to clubs. And if you were down there, it meant it was cool and I would go down there too, is the idea.
Yeah.
As you're going through this addictive lifestyle, as you're partying in all the clubs and hanging out with all the girls and seeing the flash bulbs in front of you, what was your dream? What were you living just for the next party, or was there a vision you had for your life beyond that?
Dude, at that moment, I was so lost. Um, I honestly wasn't thinking about the next day. It was just one of the things I was in the moment there with when that stuff was happening, but I was also so uncomfortable being in the moment that I was constantly trying to escape it.
It's a hard place to find yourself.
Yeah.
What
And
what
that's not, I mean, that's what's interesting is looking back and when I talk about this stuff, it's bizarre because I remember so clearly when I was right before the OCD and stuff. I mean, I was such, and even with OCD, I mean, I was such an ambitious, motivating, like, somebody that was always wanted to challenge myself, like was a go-getter. And it's just weird looking back how far gone I became in my disease of addiction and the isolation and how it just slowly started to chip away at the things I loved. Because even by 19, 20, like 18, 19, 20, it's like all the stuff that we opened talking about in the show, those things were not happening very often. Surfing, skating, snowboarding. I mean, that was all stuff that slowly started to get chipped away. And as you go down my story at the end, it's like those things were non-existent. Everything that I had loved and enjoyed and wanted to be a part of were just not there anymore. And that's where I summarize my drinking and using is drinking and using at first was fun. It became a lifestyle. And then before you know it, it became a way of survival for me. And that's why they classify addiction as a disease is because it's primary, it's chronic, and it's progressive. And that's really the stages of where I'd walked into it. And to just help summarize the story from 18 to 23, I'd gone to pretty much a dozen treatment centers during that time. And I was arrested a whole bunch of times and lost a lot of relationships and friendships. And again, at the end of the day, I lost sight of who I really was. And which is hard, especially just with faith. And going back to just my upbringing, as I was raised in a Christian household. Dad was actually a deacon in the church. Even at 13 years old, we were in Israel and he had me baptized in the Jordan River. And I always was connected and rooted in that area of my faith, but and I've never had a problem believing. But obviously, as I was in my teens, late teens, early 20s, there's one thing to believe, but there's a whole nother thing to walk. And God just unfortunately was non-existent in my life at that time.
there's an old proverb, I think, and it says something to the effect of we return to sin like dogs return to their own vomit. And it's a repulsive analogy. And yet you see dogs do this and addicts do it. And people who are just stuck in poor decision making do this too. We return to the very thing that caused us the illness that we cast away, and then we go back to it again and again. So you did this more than a dozen times. Addiction centers, that's where you're going for your help. What
Yep.
finally worked?
What you're talking about is the definition of insanity. But for me, again, is minus all that stuff, I think it's also important to state addiction took me not only to contemplation, but attempting suicide, took everything from me. But the moment of clarity was when I was yet again, this is like the thousandth time in a therapy office with my mom and dad. And my dad has never broken down that I'd ever seen besides when his mother had passed away. Him and my mom are in there and we're talking about like what these next steps are of what I'm going to be doing. And I was struggling and going through it. And he basically just looked over and he goes, Mom and I just don't know what to do anymore. Our marriage is suffering. The family is has no idea what to do. And mom and I are just like two planks of wood lying in bed waiting for the phone call that you're dead. And what for whatever reason, there was multiple incidences, multiple conversations that have happened, but there was this literally like a moment of clarity, and there was like a light that came on
Wow.
where I said, clearly I don't care enough about myself. But again, going back to everything I'd shared about my family history and my family dynamic, they became my motivating factor. And July 23rd, 2010 is when I went back to treatment again, and where I really basically started my journey on into recovery.
Tell me the difference between that time and the time before, and the time before, and the time before, and the time before. What was it about your mindset, your heart, your willingness on that date that set it apart from the previous ones?
Couldn't tell you. Honestly, I think it was God's timing because there was multiple other situations, meetings, interventions, family time, girlfriends, courts, like similar message. But I think that the timing was right and it was just laid on my heart and God just opened me to be able to receive that. And that's why I said I painted the picture that there wasn't necessarily something different about this. It was the way I received that message that time because I was in a place of I don't know if I was just in complete defeat or if I did. One of the things I've shared with people is that in that moment, I'll never forget it. I remember seeing my parents age 10 years in the matter of two. And again, is like I said, I think it comes back to really being able to get a clear picture of what I was doing, not only to myself, but to everybody else around me. And that really allotted me the opportunity to have another chance at it. I think again, I was so deep and so sick in a lot of these areas that it's a fantastic question, but that was the specific instance and or actions that were taking place to ignite that, but it wasn't something that was necessarily different than before. Yeah, that context, I mean, my dad breaking down and him
Right.
sharing, the aspects of what my mom and them were walking through. Maybe they said something very similar to that before, but I just didn't receive it. But again, is I was only 23 when that happened. And so, it was beyond the alcohol too, though. You have to understand this with the underlying OCD issues, a lot of the trauma and a lot of the things that I'd put myself in. I just don't know that I knew how to function or operate normal or whatever normal is at all. And that's why I really turn this back to the God shot thing, because I shouldn't be here, man. From the amount that I used, the fights, the car accidents, the usage, just everything that was there, there's definitely a plan from somebody above, and that is very apparent. And I think that just happened to be the time.
Hmm. So I've never walked the 12 steps, but I know one of them is to turn your life over to a higher power.
Turn your will and your life over. Yes.
What step is that?
Number two.
Yeah. You grew up in a Christian home. You grew up with a dad who was a deacon in the church. You grew up getting baptized in the Jordan. And you're in pretty elite company when you're getting baptized in the Jordan, man. So congratulations on that.
Thank
Had
you.
you ever really sincerely turned your life over to a higher power?
Again, is growing up, and I believed in God. I remember when I was even at 7, 8 years old, reading my children's Bible out on the deck, and I always was like yearning for it. But I think conceptually and stuff, I didn't really understand. And then as I got into my teens, I got too distracted to really try to develop a relationship. But I would say that I've had a relationship with God. I don't want to discount that, but not to the depths or the degree that I do today.
Talk about that. I'm not going to let you sneak out of your 20s quite yet, but what is your relationship? What's your intentional relationship with God like today? What do you do that's just a matter of habit?
My relationship with the Lord is something that is daily. I think, and something that we can talk about that just ties in my whole program is consistency and structure create safety. And in my structure, God is a big part of that, which ultimately creates that safety. And every morning I wake up and I listen to a devotional that our church puts together and puts out. And so I get right minded. I am very intentional about prayer. And so I connect every morning in prayer, and that is something that I do throughout my day. It's 20 times a day. Before I came on here, I prayed, does God lead, guide, direct this conversation, however it's supposed to go? Sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter, but prayer is something that is consistent. I have a men's accountability group that I actually do one-on-one with a guy every Tuesday morning, and we go over scripture, and we have an accountability list that we have of 7 different questions, which is directly tied to biblical principles and how we're living and leading our life as men. The other piece is I go to another it's a men's group, and there's about 8 of us every Thursday morning, and we participate. And it's an opportunity for guys to get just very open and vulnerable and share and connect and talk about what's going on in their life. And we lean into the scripture and apply that to what we're all going through. Sunday is something that we're very involved with in our church and are getting deeper rooted in that. I'm actually looking at potentially putting together an addiction program in the church that we are connected with, at least being a part of that process, and intertwined and interweaved multiple times throughout the week. And then obviously reading scripture is the closest and the best way to get to God, is actually read his word. So that's something that I'm trying to get better at. It's not something that I do every single day, but I'm trying to get to a place where even if it's 10, 15 minutes a day is something that I'm doing and connecting in that area. And then I think also service is a huge point and proponent of my program. And I think ties directly to God. And then at night, like I think again is a part of how God works through me, is I actually take the time with my 7-year-old daughter, and this is to develop rapport and communication, because that's, even though my parents were amazing parents and stuff, I think there's obviously a lot of things that we can always learn from. And I think that they did an amazing job. I don't
Right.
want to discredit that, but I also think the 90s are very different than today, and they
Right.
probably communicated more than most parents did in the 90s. But having that very intentional, safe place to be able to go to, I can confide in them and things like that. But having that really deep bond, I want to instill that with my daughter, especially since she's pre-genetically disposed to addiction. There's a 50% chance that she's going to have addiction given my lineage and my family dynamic. I am, and I wasn't. I'm Cherokee, German, and Irish. Should have had a stamp on the forehead when I came out of the womb. And all jokes aside, looking at that, I'm very intentional with Delilah. And at night, we basically do 4 questions. It's what was good today? What could I improve upon? What am I grateful for? And what's my goal? And that right there has allotted us an opportunity to really develop rapport and connection at a deeper level. And even at 6, 7 years old, she's been able to open up. What could I have done better today? It's a girl was mean to me, or I was mean to a girl. Like just these little things that seem silly right now, but it starts to build that rapport and that trust. And the reason why I say that's important is because every single night after that, we pray and we connect. And it's like, we've gotten in such a repetition now. You want to talk about like a healthy habit, is that if we don't do it, because there's times we've missed, and she'll be like, Dad, we didn't do our list. And it's like we've instilled that, but it's also incorporated like after it's like, Dad, are you praying tonight or am I praying tonight? Like it's just we're starting this, and like I'm seeing how those things are, coming out. And it's like I know we're doing a good job because when you look at my child's drawing book and she has pictures, I love Jesus and like this different things. Again, I'm not saying we're perfect by any means, but I know that we're starting to instill the right things at the right time. And half the time of her on her gratitude list, it's not only what you're grateful for, but why. Jesus is
Mm.
on there a lot of the time, and for her, Jesus creating our family, and that He's always there and providing love, whatever it is that's in her heart. And again, she's 7, right? The vocabulary only goes so deep, but it's profound. And my relationship with the Lord has allotted me the opportunity to develop this relationship as a father to His daughter.
Dude, if I was a little closer, I'd either hug you or high five you. So I'll let you have a sip of that water, catch your breath, and while you're doing that, at age 5, I started going through 4 questions with my daughter every night. Best part of your day, worst part of your day. One kind thing someone did for you, and one kind thing you did for someone else, and then we pray together.
Wow.
We've done that. She's 13 now. Almost every single night. It is very rare that we miss a night. And if we do, she brings it up to me as if I'm a horrible parent because I missed last night, Dad. And the cool thing is, as this little girl is becoming a young woman, she's a teenager now. She's still asking to be tucked in. She's still asking to go through those 4 questions. She's still asking to pray with me. And that is so awesome. So I think it's beautiful that this little girl, Delilah, has her daddy next to her. And the cool thing is, Dad, years from now, she's still going to be leaning up and leaning in and looking up at you. Congratulations on that.
I love that. I appreciate you sharing that on your side. And
Dude, you're
that's,
so intent, like everything you went through and that answer of how you're growing in your faith, it's so intentional. None of this is by happenstance.
and that
It's
would none
not
of this
just
would have happened. None of
go
this would have
ahead.
happened on this end. A big decision was we moved across the country and to come over here to Tennessee. And I it wasn't like we were just picking and look, I got 30 family members that live within a 15-mile radius in Orange County from Laguna Beach, Corona del Mar, Newport Beach, and Costa Mesa. So it was not like an easy decision to do that.
Right.
But by the gift of sobriety and the connection with God, it's allotted me the opportunity not to just move across city lines, state lines, but across the country to make a better decision for what I believe was for my kids. And that wouldn't have happened without having a lot of this be rooted in this process. And I don't know. I think even just like God played a big part when we came here, and obviously when we were looking and touring, and we went to Delilah's gymnastic class for her classes. They opened up in prayer. Like there was just so many signs that were here when we came here, and it was just, I believe God really guided this path for us to get to where we're at, and it's been incredible. But again, it's also through the gift of sobriety that we've been able to make a lot of these monumental changes or shifts in my life, at least.
One of the other 12 steps that may not be known by the folks who have not walked through it, but I think it's one of the most powerful ones, just from a little bit of research around it, is this idea of making amends. Tell
Yeah.
our listeners and viewers what it means to make amends and what it meant for you.
Amends is a huge part. That's where you basically are taking ownership and accountability for your shortcomings and for your wrongdoings. And I was making amends. I'm still making amends all these years later. And again, if you're working a program, it's not like you do all 12 and then you're done. It's important to check yourself constantly because we do fall short, and it's important to take ownership and accountability. But when I make amends to somebody, specifically, I'll go back to when I was using for close friends or family that I had hurt and different things. Is basically I would let them know, hey, look, I want to let you know, first of all, I am very sorry for what I had done. That was not me. I was active in my addiction. I'm not justifying or making excuses for that. And I want to let you know that I take complete ownership and accountability for what had happened. And if there's anything that I can do to make it right, I want you to let me know. But making amends is cleaning your side of the street and keeping your side of the street in order. And it's one of those things like you hear in the program is it's if you see someone walking down the street, you don't have to walk across the street to avoid them. And so it's being able to clean up that wreckage. And it's a very instrumental and important and imperative part of the program. And like I said, it's for me on my end. What I do is even on a daily basis before I go to bed is I identify the things that where I had shortcomings and the areas that I need to make improvement. And I also do the things that I did well, which I think is important because people need to give themselves grace and identify the things that we do well. But there's times where I've fallen short, whether it was an argument with my wife or it was I overreacted to my kid. And before I go to bed, I wanna correct that, so when I go to bed, the next morning is a fresh day, and I think it's something that I implement on a daily basis now, which is important, but when I was going through the steps initially and making my amends, it was a huge part of the recovery process, and it's also a very freeing part because it's about ownership.
You're basically like a quote book. Like when I listen to you speak, when you do interviews, when you write, about every third sentence you use is something you could tweet out. Like it's so solid. One thing I've heard you say a couple times is what is predictable is preventable.
Yeah.
I'd never heard it before, but I think this is true in addiction and it's true in almost every aspect of life. What is predictable is preventable. And the thing I wrote underneath this, in the notes I kept, was the time you took a picture, the mug shot.
Yeah.
So when you were at your low water mark, you were arrested again,
Yeah.
and you took a mug shot that represented just the worst. You put it in a frame and you put it next to your toothbrush.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that?
Man, you did your due diligence, brother. You're bringing up stuff I even forgot about. I did that because it was a reminder. It's something where I was advised of me to just because relapse was a part of my story and just what I was going through, and it was a visual reminder. As we know, a picture says 1,000 words, and it was something where I obviously brushed my teeth a couple times a day, I hope. And I opened that drawer, and it's just a reminder of like, I don't want to go back to that place today. And it was one of the most humiliating, toughest, hardest times I was going through. I had a few of them, but that was one that I was able to have documented and keep that as a reminder. And I say what's predictable is preventable because I also think when it comes to recovery and stuff, and people argue with me, and people that are much smarter than me, doctors and different things. But for me, in my story, what I can say the truth is behind this is that I don't think relapse is necessarily a part of recovery. I actually think it's a lack thereof. Because when I had 5 years of sobriety after I actively arrested the disease and after I got stabilized and I started to do everything that I needed to do and I started to get into a life of recovery, I ended up relapsing down the road. And if I look back at what was going on in my life on year 4, 4.5, whatever it was, I stopped doing everything that I had done to get to where I was at. I
Right.
look back, I'm like, "Ah, the meetings fell off. Ah, therapy fell off. Ah, my sponsor stopped communicating with my sponsor." All these things started falling off. And again, is it's in I'm not saying that I relapsed all the time, but I look back and I can see though there was areas where I completely had fallen short. Lack of honesty, lack of willingness, lack of reaching out and doing what was advised of me. And that was something for me as a part of my story is I saw that. And that's why for me, this time around, after just taking 5 years, December 17th, it was important for me. And it's important to me on a daily basis to have a routine and have a structure in place because it is upon me and on myself to work a program and to have that in order on a daily basis because drugs and alcohol aren't the problem. Those were the solution. And so it'd be if everybody just was trying to come off of drugs and alcohol, they'd go to detox and be on their happy way. It's the thing between my 2 ears that gets all distorted and often thinking. So it's for me on a daily basis to make sure I keep that in check and have that routine in place. And trust me, I'm not perfect with it. And just because I'm sober doesn't, I have hard days. I mean, we talked before the show. This last month has been brutal. This last week was just trying to survive. But again, as I had to make sure that I was doing the key things for my program to keep in order and keep in check to continue to thrive. And I can start to see it. You hear the term dry drunk. You hear people that are struggling and
Yeah.
it's because there's a
Super,
big
super
difference.
common.
There's a big difference between somebody that's abstinence of drugs and alcohol versus somebody who's living their life in recovery. And so I think it's important. Like for me, I can tell when I'm starting to get into the dry drunk phases. I'm irritable, I'm restless, I'm discontent, I'm frustrated, I'm argumentative. I just all the different things that are there. I'm like, man, I need to take a look at that because it's one thing and that happens, but it's when those dominoes fall, it's much better to catch only if there's three or four that have fallen versus trying to catch a whole stack.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. I can go on
No, it makes perfect sense.
forever.
And I love the term. I appreciate the term dry drunk because a lot of folks think they're not a alcoholic or addicted because they may not use. But what you're referring to is it's not just the way you present, it's the way you show up. It's the way you treat others. It's the way you look in the mirror and feel about life.
But the
And
thing you just hit on a really big thing though is it doesn't have to be somebody that drinks every single day. I know somebody that drinks once a year and they're alcoholic. The reason I say that is because it's what it does to them when they consume. And so I think again, as people need to get out of the context of how much or how often I am. Obviously that plays into it, but it's also what it does to you when you drink.
let's begin launching our plane upward and onward. Tell me what happened October 12th, 2013.
Oh God, I got married, man. I got married October 12th, 2013. 10,
Dude,
12,
it's
13.
almost obnoxious. You're already a pretty handsome dude. This girl that you end up marrying is stunning.
Thank
The
you.
two of you look like out of a textbook for what a beautiful wedding ought to look like. And then the backdrop of the people. And the thing that jumped off at me most from your wedding photos was the joy. It wasn't just a beer buzz or a nice tux that you rented or a show off for your friends. You had obvious joy in both of your hearts. Would you talk less about the reception and more about that?
Yeah, Ashley, when you find somebody that you love and that you care about more than anything, that's just the true and pure happiness that comes from it, where you're looking to start a life together. And I think for me, in that moment, I honestly, and I say this, I'm not being facetious, is I didn't think I was going to make it to 21 years old, let alone be sober, getting married, having hundreds of people around us, friends and family to celebrate. That was the last time that a lot of very instrumental people were in our life, being my grandpa, her dad, grandmas, aunts, great aunts. We lost so many family members just a couple years after that. But that was the last time that everybody we knew was in the same room together. And it was just a very monumental time because it was really just, it was for me, a celebration and an opportunity at a whole new life. And then to find somebody like Ashley and her family and some people that are just so loving, caring, kind, and supportive. And it was just a beautiful day. It's a testament from that what we're talking about now till to this living moment. Just the role that Ashley plays in my life and what we signed up to do together and how we live life together. We took those vows and we meant them.
You used to get paid to party for people.
Yeah.
Tell our listeners and viewers how you make a living today. I think it's so cool how redemptive and full circle your life has become. So, what's your work about today?
Yeah, God, you want to talk about full circle. It's incredible to see how God is worked in my life. And so I'm actually the director for Dr. Amens Change Your Brain Foundation. So I run his foundation, and we have three main pillars, which is research, education, and scholarships. We're really at a place where we're trying to end mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health. I work at A-List Health, which is the first ever JCO accredited, Joint Commission accredited at-home treatment provider. They basically bring treatment to the comfort of your own home. We primarily work with C-level executives, athletes, and entertainers. It's been an incredible business. And then I speak all over the country, which has been incredible. My wife and I do that. And then the thing that I've been most excited about recently in this last year and a half is Sober Sure and Sober Safe, which is the first ever transdermal alcohol monitoring detection system. Basically, the band has got GPS tracking, alcohol monitoring, band removal notifications, and we're utilizing that for people that are coming out of treatment for higher level of accountability and establishing trust. The court systems we're working with, we're using it from a preventative measure for young teens and new drivers. We've partnered with Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but just being a part of all of these conglomerates that are so supportive and intertwined with one another to make a difference, it's truly incredible. And obviously a spokesperson just for mental health and addiction as a whole, as a lot of people struggle. Addiction is the leading cause of death in America for 50-year-old individuals and younger. And just if I can share my story and create some sense of relatability to let people know they're not alone and that there's a way out and that there's a solution, then that's what I try to do today in every area. But I basically try to align with things that are for making a difference and creating a better quality of life for people. And we live in a bizarre world, man. We live in a very sick world, a fallen world. And so anything that we can do and align with people that are making a difference is really important.
So I mentioned ahead of time, I did over prepare. I have 42 pages of notes from previous books, podcasts, interviews you've been on. One of the quotes I wrote it down twice, so it must be somewhat meaningful, at least to me. These are your words. My early life was all about me. Today, my life is about helping others and not looking for anything at all in return. Then you paused for a moment, looked up and said, and it's a far better life because of that shift.
Yeah.
As we get ready to move into what we call the Live Inspired 7 questions, unpack that quote for me. Why is your life better today? Because you're less worried about you and more focused on others.
I'll start by, I really try to have a mantra that I live by every day. It's do something nice for somebody and don't get caught and don't look for accolade or appreciation within that. And I've learned through my own trials and tribulations, when you get out of self and help somebody else, one, it makes you realize that you don't have to focus so much on yourself, but two is everybody's going through something. Today, literally this morning, I was dealing with somebody who was being kicked out of a program, and they're trying their very best, and unfortunately, they just weren't fitting the mold. And to be in a place where, again, drive an hour down and go connect with the person and meet with them and be a part of that process. They just weren't a right fit for this place. And to see the disappointment and the discouragement on their face, but to be able to be there and be somebody that they could have a shoulder to lean on and confide in and know that they're not alone and that we're going to continue to work to find the right place that's going to be the appropriate to be able to address what it is that they're doing. There's no amount of money, there's no amount of drugs or alcohol that can fulfill what that does. And like some of the things that I've experienced, whether it's around the holidays or specifically like Christmas, Thanksgiving, major holidays, is I'll get text and voicemails and stuff from people just saying, thank you so much for being a part of our life and allowing us to have our dad back, our mom back, our brother back. And there's just something that it does to you neurologically that is, it's your brain produces more potent chemicals than heroin. You just got to let it work. And that's one of those amazing things is giving back and being a part of that. And I think I love seeing people when they're in these early stages when they're struggling. I don't love seeing them struggling, but I love seeing the journey that they take and where they end up. It's amazing to see somebody where they are at day one, where they are at 60 days, 120, 6 months, a year. It is, it's crazy. And there's nothing better than that.
Jason, we're having this conversation. You've got your wife waiting for you. I've got kids at home, and my wife's waiting for me, and our lives are good. And we've worked through some of the struggles and are working through other struggles. But the skies are clear now. For someone listening to our voice and our conversation, thinking, man, I'm glad these guys are where they are, but that's not my life. I didn't end up with the girl. I didn't end up with the kids. I'm still struggling with some type of addiction. I haven't achieved what I thought I might professionally. I wasn't born with the right type of genetic code. Whatever the rationale might be for someone just dealing with despair right now in their life, what's some encouragement you might guide them with right now? What's something they could do?
I think the first thing is you're not alone. There's millions of people out there that are struggling, millions. And I think it's one is give yourself some grace. Look in the mirror and try to say something positive to yourself. And it depends on the level of what it is that you're struggling with. And for somebody that's struggling with addiction, I would advise you reach out, talk to somebody, whether it's your friend, your parent, your brother, your sister, whoever it is, connect with somebody and just be able to be open and vulnerable around what it is that you're going through. And just in general, if somebody's
Right.
just going through stuff, is create awareness to it. Identify what it is that is going on. And it's a AAA modality that I live by. It's awareness, acceptance, and action. If you're not aware of what's going on, you can't accept it. If you can't accept it, you can't take action.
Right.
So bring light to what it is that you're struggling with and bring awareness to it. And then accept and just have radical acceptance around what's going on in your life. And then from there, once you're at that point, that's where you can formulate whether you reach out to somebody or you have an idea of what the next indicated step might be to take action on it. But it's just try to make that 1% shift today of just doing a little bit better. And I think that's something I heard on a book this morning that I was listening to, it was incredible. Was if we just make a 1% shift and change every day for 1 year, we'll be 37% better by the end of that year. It's hard to see growth and change instantly, which a lot of us want is to have the instant gratification, but just know it's going to take some time. It's going to take some effort. It's going to take some work. And that's really important. And an analogy I use that's really easy to conceptualize is, hey, look, if you go to the gym once a week, you're gonna get the results of going once a week. If you go to the gym 5 days a week, you're gonna get the results of going. So whatever it is that you're dealing with in your life, apply that metric to it and understand that's something that you can put into and you can make that change. I think that's the biggest takeaway. It took me all that time to get here is you can change.
Jason Waller, we're going to let you run in a minute, but not before you give us short answers to the Live Inspired seven questions. We've gotten all 700 plus of our guests through. So, brother, from astronauts to presidents, this is safe territory. Here we go. Question number one: what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
I'm going to say the one I'm reading right now, which it's Atomic Habits. It has nothing.
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits.
Incredible book. So, Atomic Habits, great book. If you haven't read it, y'all should check it out. What's one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little kid in Laguna Beach that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Kind.
Mm.
Giving.
Wow, man. That must have been a very giving kid. If your home caught fire and your wife and kids and animals are all out and you have an opportunity of running back inside and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing you would grab?
I have a file with all of my kids, all of our very important stuff. I have a box that's ready to go. So I've actually thought through this, unfortunately, but I have a box of all of our just documents, first handprints, fingerprints, footprints, just the things that we can't get back.
Growing up in California, you had to think about it more than the rest of us.
Yeah.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be seated next to?
Jesus.
What's the best advice Jesus or anyone else ever gave you?
I'd have to go with Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
What advice would you give yourself at age 20 in the middle of the rock party, man? What advice does that kid need to hear from you?
I would have told myself to be completely open, honest, and transparent around what I was going through.
Jason, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He was a loving, caring, kind father who was always there for his kids and put others before him.
Mm. The bad boy from Laguna Beach became a loving, caring, compassionate father and husband and friend to countless individuals, including the one asking the questions today. I'm grateful for your shift. I'm grateful for your redemptive story. I'm grateful for your life, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much, John.
My friends, that is Jason Waller. My name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift it is. Live inspired. My friends, I love the mantra that Jason Waller shared during our time together. Do something nice for somebody and don't get caught. Let me say it again, because I think either we aren't doing this thing or we're hoping we do get caught. So here we go. Jason's quote: do something nice for somebody and don't get caught. So today I'm going to give you a challenge as we wrap up this episode. Live Inspired podcast community, I want you to go out of your way today to do something kind for another individual, whether it's a small gesture or a mighty one. Do something kind for someone and seek no credit for it. The reward, it turns out, is the act of love itself. My friends, if you enjoyed today's episode on recovery and generosity and love for life, you will love my conversation with Katie Collier. Katie has an amazing life story. I'm not going to unpack all of it for you today, but a woman who has experienced all kinds of hardship, and yet she has built up a mighty business, Katie's Pizza, right here in St. Louis, with now a global platform to do work around the world. It's an amazing story. Today, Katie celebrates more than 12 years of sobriety, 3 successful restaurants, an emerging player in the national consumer packaged goods space, and global impact. You're going to love this episode. Her incredible journey of recovery, the pivotal role that family played in her success, and her unwavering commitment to creating moments of joy and connection through her culinary creations. It's an awesome episode, one of my favorites. Tune in to the Katie Collier episode at 586. Or go ahead and join me right now at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. We'll have a link to Katie's episode right there. Family, friends, listeners, viewers, fellow sojourners, I want to thank you for being part of our podcast community. I want to thank you for living out the values of this community, for making a difference in your community. and for believing like I do that the foundation is firm and the best is yet to come. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.